If you didn't like the performance, or you thought the acting was bad, the script was ridiculous, and maybe the tickets were too expensive, you're just a racist who doesn't have any taste. And the only way we'll be able to change the programming is to vote. Joining me now to react, Fox News contributor and former White House press secretary Ari Fleischer, Congressman Matt Gaetz, and Fox News contributor Joe Concha. So, Ari, I've never seen anything like this before. Perfectly staged, perfectly scripted, and at the end they all just pat themselves on the back for a job well done. This has to be a new phenomenon in Washington. Is it not?
Look, Jesse, I thought that was a perfect media critique of the show you just watched. And the fundamental problem here is the original sin of journalism. Reporters fundamentally line up with the Democratic Party, far more than they line up with the Republican Party. And so when you hear reporters frame various issues, it was all about, we should abolish the filibuster, shouldn't we, Mr. President, so you can get your agenda through. Immigrants, migrants have a right to come to America, don't they, Mr. Biden? Even though there are a lot of them coming now, but how are you going to make it all work? The Georgia legislation, they call it voter restrictions. They don't call it voter integrity. And so right from the start, all the questions to Joe Biden reflect how can we help you frame how can you get your Democratic agenda through. They're not even neutral. They're not in the middle. They're certainly not conservative. But what's so sad about it is they don't even play the devil's advocate anymore.
Joe Concha, not only did he have the script in front of him when he read about North Korea, he read a script about China, he read statistics about the border, he had the little pictures of the correspondence on who to call and then what order to call on. And they know they're being called on. I'm sure it's all done in advance. To think that this could happen, I don't know, spontaneously, behind-the-scenes conversations have to be going on between the networks, the newspapers, and the Biden communication shop about what to ask, what order you're going to be called on, and since everybody's in agreement, it's a carefully scripted event being framed as something that's happening naturally. But when Biden forgets his lines, or when you have 4 questions about a filibuster that not a single American is even talking about, you can see how programmed the event is, but how programmed the American people are being.
And Jesse, it's not just deprogrammed in this case, but also there's a disconnect here as well, because there wasn't one question about the biggest issue. You look at any poll out there as far as what is most important to the American people, and that is COVID. Not one question. And Chuck Todd, you played the clip earlier, he said there's clearly not any negative questions about COVID. Oh, well, as a parent of young children, I certainly would have one. It would be, Mr. Biden, as a candidate, you said that you would follow the doctors, you would listen to the scientists, and follow the data. Your CDC director says right now it is safe to reopen schools fully, even if teachers aren't vaccinated. So why aren't we opening fully? What do you say to the parents of America on that? So I'm pretty sure that's a question that could have been asked in that situation. But that's the disconnect, where you have this media bubble that exists in New York and in Washington, and it's a hive mentality to all kind of think along the same lines, or in this case, not think along the ways of COVID. And then afterwards, all the reviews talked about how empathetic Mr. Biden was and how nice he was to the press without anybody questioning, to your point, why the leader of the free world. Again, this isn't a 78-year-old who's worked at the Food King for too long. This is somebody who is running the country and is one of the most powerful people on the planet. Why does he need to read off of notes in these situations? And also, to your point, who's writing these notes? Is it Susan Rice? Because I'm pretty sure a lot of people out there would take Jerry Rice or Donna Rice or Ray Rice before they take Susan Rice running the country in that regard. And finally, the fact checks afterwards in terms of the reviews that we saw were almost non-existent on television, where Joe Biden says, for instance, quote, "We're sending back the vast majority of families who are coming to the U.S. border." No, you're not. Axios says that's about 13%. So that was a lie. Or when Biden said this, and this was a doozy, the idea that I'm going to say, which I would never do, if an unaccompanied child ends up at the border, we're just going to let them starve to death and stay on the other side. No other previous administration did either, except Trump. In other words, he just accused his predecessor of starving children. That, of course, is a lie. There is no documentation around that whatsoever. So this was a disgrace all around in terms of the questions that were asked
the whole
and
event
the
would
answers
be like
that were given as well.
Jesse Waters invited Joe Concha on Waters World. We did an interview, and then you wrote a magnificent article about how great Waters World was with Joe Concha on it afterwards. All right, Congressman, no questions on Hunter Biden, no questions on Keystone, gas prices, teachers' unions basically leveraging students to jump the line for vaccines and Joe letting them. I mean, if you switch parties to become a Democrat, how easy would it be to be president?
Yeah. Easy to be president, easy to be a member of the president's family. Just before this press conference, there was explosive reporting from Politico, a piece by Tara Palmieri and Ben Schreckinger, where the Secret Service cannot deny that they were doing fixer work for Hunter Biden. Think about if that had been a member of the Trump family. I mean, I think Donald Trump probably regrets using Michael Cohen as a fixer, but he never used the Secret Service to clean up criminal activity. I love the fact that you used a Truman Show reference. I actually grew up in the home that was Jim Carrey's home in that movie. But when you watch a Trump press conference, it really is reality television. It's visceral and reactive and sometimes a little catty and mean. But when you watch Joe Biden, it's like a sad melodrama where the actor sort of goes off script. I just wish Joe Biden would give up on the war in Afghanistan or the war in Syria or the war on drugs the way he gives up on his own sentences.
Well, maybe we're all living in the Gaetz show since you grew up in the home from the
You're welcome anytime.
From the Truman Show. I don't know. There's cameras everywhere around you, Matt. It's hard to tell. All right, gentlemen, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
This is Congressman Matt Gaetz. If you liked that video, make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, and join us on our daily podcast, Hot Takes with Matt Gaetz, on your favorite podcast listening platform.